I'm the head coach for Honor Guards Fencing Club, DC Moons. In this video, we'll be demonstrating to you flexibility exercises, the kind of stretching exercises you need to do to prevent injury, increase your overall flexibility, and to prepare you for any fencing practice or tournament. With me today is the Honor Guards Strength, Conditioning, and Flexibility Coach, Laurel Ryan. So what's the first exercise we have to work on?
We're going to start in a deep lunge, so pick a foot and put it as far in front of you as is comfortable, and lower yourself into a lunge. If you like, you can keep your hands on your knees, or if that is uncomfortable for you, you can put both of your hands on the outside of your foot. You're going to be feeling this in the hip flexor of the leg that is straight behind you, and you're going to hold this for 35 seconds or as long as is comfortable. From here, you're going to take the leg that is straightened behind you and you're going to bend it underneath yourself so that you're sitting on both sit bones, and you're going to hug this knee up to your chest. This is going to be stretching out the glute in the leg you're hugging up, and it's going to give you a nice little stretch.
Which muscle is this stretching?
Your glute.
Oh, the gluteus?
Mm-hmm. In this position, you should be stretching out your right gluteus maximus, and the closer you hug your knee up to your chest, the more deep of a stretch you're going to get.
Let's do that again.
Okay. In this position, you're stretching out your gluteus maximus, and the closer you hug your knee to your chest, the deeper of a stretch you're going to get. From here, we're going to unwind the stretch, so go ahead and put your hands down right in front of you, and twist back into your lunge. From here, we're going to put down our knee back onto the ground, and you're going to come up so that your knee is at a right angle in front of you. From here, you're just going to put both of your hands into the crease of your hip and lean forward to deepen the crease. This is going to stretch out your hip flexors on both sides, and it's also going to stretch out the top of the leg that is behind you.
Where are the hip flexor muscles?
So the hip flexor muscles, if you can stay right there, are the ones that are right here, connecting your legs to your lower torso.
They run up the inside of the thigh?
Up the outside.
Up the outside,
Mm-hmm.
all right? Yeah, I can definitely feel this stretch in the upper part and the front of my thigh.
And if this gets uncomfortable for your knee that's behind you, you can go ahead and put both of your elbows on the floor if that's available to you.
Oh, that takes a lot of strain off of the knee.
It does.
Okay. So we have to do the other side.
Yeah, let's do the other side. So we started with our right leg, so we're going to put our left legs up. Go ahead and put both of your hands into the crease of your hip again, and lean forward. And again, if this is putting too much strain on your knee, you can go ahead and put your elbows on the ground if that's available to you.
Well, you have extensive training in dance, and you're a lot younger than I am. So your range of flexibility is going to be a lot more than mine in all of these motions.
The important thing is to pace yourself and to not push yourself to do something that your body isn't able to do.
So people who are younger and just starting out on this program, or people who, like me, are a little older.
There are modifications for every stretch. I would say just don't go as deep into it if you're finding that it's painful, or only go until you feel like it's a comfortable spot for you.
How about if I wanted to just increase my general flexibility? Shouldn't I push things a little harder?
You should, but not to a point where you're going to injure yourself.
So from here we're going to do the lunge and the fold up the opposite way?
Yep. And again, hugging that knee to your chest is going to deepen the stretch in your glute. Next, we're going to move into the progression from the lunge into a plank. So we're going to find ourselves back in that same lunge. We had our knee on the ground, our two hands in our hip crease, and we're going to move our elbows to the floor. From this position, we're going to move the forward leg back to meet the other one. And you're just going to hold this plank. So a plank is an isolated position, and it might be difficult to hold. To make it easier, make sure you're doing your plank correctly. You want your hips to be parallel to the ground so that your entire body is making a straight line, almost like an equal sign. You want your shoulders to be directly over your elbows That's gonna help you balance. And you want your head to be all the way in line with your spine so that you're getting a straight line from the very bottom of your spine straight out the top of your head. You're gonna hold this plank position for as long as you can, or 45 seconds, whichever is available to you, and then we're gonna move into the next stretch. So DC is gonna lower his knees to the ground. He's gonna push his hips back to meet his feet, and he's gonna leave his hands on the floor. This is called a child's pose. It's a yoga position. He's gonna actually walk his hands out a little bit further, so his arms are almost straight, keeping his head on the floor or as close to the floor as he can get it. This is stretching out his shoulders right now and his upper back, while also giving him a little bit of a stretch in his thighs. While resting in the child's pose, we're gonna take this opportunity to stretch out the latissimus dorsi. I'm gonna have DC walk his hands to one side as far as he can go. This is stretching out his entire side body and his arms. And he's gonna hold this for 45 seconds or for whatever is comfortable for you. After that, you're gonna walk yourself back to center and repeat on the other side. Try to keep your hip bones connected to your feet throughout this entire stretch.
So Laurel, I notice when I'm doing the stretch in the child's pose that when I'm extremely rotating, it affects my breathing. In my previous video, I talked about how important it was to do deep breathing, but isn't there a certain technique, sequencing or something, where breathing and stretching have to be done in a certain way?
The best technique I could suggest would be breathing in through your nose and out fully through your mouth whenever you're stretching. You want your lungs to be completely full and then completely empty every time you inhale and exhale. If you're in a stretch like that child's pose where you're rotated all the way to the side and you feel like you're overextended, I would suggest walking back your hands a little bit to make the stretch a little bit more shallow so you can still breathe while you're in it and you can still get that full inhale and full exhale every single time. From the child's pose, we're going to progress into a downward dog. So what you're going to do is tuck your toes underneath and you're going to lift your hips up to the ceiling. And in this position, you want to make sure that your knees and your elbows are straight. You're stretching the muscles across the back of your shoulders and down your spine all the way to your head. You're also getting a little bit of a stretch in your bicep and in your calves. So while DC is here, he's going to start treading his feet. This just increases the stretch in his calf muscles. And it also puts a little bit more weight into his hands. You can stop treading your feet now. Now to come out of this, he's going to walk his feet towards his hands, trying to keep his knees straight for as long as he can. And he's going to roll up his spine to stand up slowly so that you don't get a head rush. How do you feel?
Feels like my spine is a chain of individual links.
You should feel like your spine is going up vertebra by vertebra as you're standing, because that's going to keep your head from getting dizzy when you stand straight up.
Instead of bending at the waist and pivoting from my hips.
You want to think of your spine as a ribbon that's just rolling back onto the spool.
It's an interesting visual. A lot of going back down the same way. Does that help at all?
It does, so why don't you try? And I want you to imagine you have a really good connection between your head and your tail so that your head is actually moving towards your pelvic bones. And you should be able to see a really nice C curve in his spine as he's rolling up. And no head rush. So next we're going to do a couple of stretches for the muscles in your neck. You want to really, really gently tilt your head to one side and apply some pressure on it with your hand. You're not pushing on your head, you're just letting the weight of your hand rest on your head. And you're going to do both sides. After that, you're going to take both of your hands and put them behind your head and just rest them on top as you look at the floor. From there, you're going to take both of your hands one more time. You're going to look at the ceiling and you're just going to press against your chin. Again, you're not pushing your head and you're not trying to force it to go anywhere. You're just letting the weight of your hands lower it a tiny, tiny bit. From there, we're just gonna make small circles with our neck, just to increase the mobility a little bit, making sure you go both directions. So next we're gonna be rolling out your wrists and your ankles. So let's start with ankles. You're gonna flex your feet and try to get your toes as close to your torso as possible. They're not gonna go very far, but you're gonna flex them as much as you can. If you're able to, you can actually go ahead and grab your toes and pull them a little closer to you. So it's not only gonna stretch out your ankles, it's also gonna stretch out your calf a little bit.
Yeah, I can certainly feel that on the back of my calves.
If you want to take the stretch a little bit further, you can actually roll your shoulders forward and point your head down towards your stomach, and it's actually going to stretch out your shoulders and your upper back a little bit as well. So let's release our feet. You can go ahead and let them just relax. You can shake them out a little bit. And from here, what we're going to do is we're going to point one foot and flex the other. And we're just going to switch back and forth between pointing and flexing. And I would do this about 20 to 30 times. When you're done with your flexes and your points, you're going to try to point your toes as hard as you can, and you're just going to lift the toes. It's kind of hard to see on DC with his shoes, but you're just going to lift your toes. So the top of the foot is still in that pointed position, but the toes are flexing. This is called a demi-point.
Well, it's easy to see by the shape of your feet that you are a ballet dancer.
From here, we're actually going to make circles with our ankles. So you're moving your toes towards each other and then rotating them out. Towards each other and rotating them out. And then you can go the opposite direction, just like we did with our neck exercises.
Very important to have your ankles and your feet warmed up. Many people in fencing don't recognize how much flexibility you have to have in your feet.
And weak ankles leads to sprained ankles, broken ankles, strained.
And a sprained ankle is the most common injury in fencing.
Don't sprain your ankle.
So fencers, of course, have to use at least their weapon hand quite vigorously, and the wrist, the suppleness and the flexibility of the wrist is very important. Do you have some specific exercises to make the wrists more flexible?
Sure. So let's start by just putting the hands together, and you're going to make a little fist, and you're actually going to roll out both of them together. Just a couple times in each direction so we can switch. And that's going to help with a little bit of the rotational mobility. So from there, I can hear your wrists cracking, which is fine. From there, we're actually just going to take one hand and we're going to bend it back just a little bit, not applying too much pressure, just letting it stretch, and then we're going to bend it back. And we're going to do down and up. And I would highly suggest doing both wrists, because being more flexible on one side as opposed to the other isn't really something you want to go for.
And in fencing, you have one weapon hand, and the other hand you're not allowed to use it. You're not allowed to switch hands in a bout. You can pick up a left-handed weapon if you're a right-handed fencer and use it in a different bout, but not once you get started.
From here, let's just shake out our hands a little bit as we're going to the next wrist exercise. You're actually going to put both of your hands on the floor with your fingertips pointing towards your knees, and you're going to try to get your entire hand all the way onto the floor, keeping your hips connected to your heels. So this is giving you a really big stretch right up the inside of your arm. From there, we're actually just going to flip our hands over so that our palms are still facing up, and we're going to stretch out the other way, so this is actually stretching the back side of your arm.
The flexors and the extensors.
Yes.
I can certainly feel that in my wrists and my forearms.
They should feel a little bit more loose now, like you can do this without an issue. So it's equally as important to stretch after practice as it is to stretch before practice. So we're going to show you a couple of really quick cool down sequences. So I'm going to have DC stand with his feet parallel. And you're going to roll down just like we did in our warm-up. He's going one vertebrae at a time, rolling all the way to the floor. And if it's available to you, you're going to put your hands flat on the ground as well. Now you can actually, DC, walk your hands a little bit further away from your feet. And he's just going to start treading his feet. So he's going to go up onto the toes of one foot and then the other. This is going to help him get a stretch up his hamstring and up his calf. All right, you can go ahead and stop treading your feet. You're gonna stay folded over in this position and you're gonna grab onto opposite elbows. And staying right there, you're gonna sway your spine from side to side. This is giving you a little bit of a release in this lower back area because usually in fencing you're very, very tense and tight in your core, and we just want to loosen that back up. So go ahead and stop swinging. You can put your hands back on the floor. You're going to bend your knees just a tiny little bit and you're going to roll back up your spine. Very slowly. We don't want that head rush. And you should do this every day, every time you finish your practice to help you loosen out your muscles.
Fencers have to turn their feet out, which is very similar to the position that ballet dancers like yourself use all the time. And so we need good flexibility in our upper thighs and on the inner surfaces of our thighs and for our hips. What good exercises could you as a ballet dancer give us fencers to help us improve in this way?
So we're going to do a second position lunge. So what we're going to start with is just turning your toes so that they're facing opposite walls, and you're going to create some distance between your feet. And you're just going to bend your knees all the way down. You're going to try to live in this position for a little while. Put your hands on your knees and try to push your knees behind you. You don't want your knees to start doing this or you're not going to get any type of stretch. So push them behind you. While you're here, you can take the time to stretch out your shoulders just by twisting one and then the other. Or you can just stay still. That's perfectly fine as well. If this isn't giving you a good enough stretch, you can put your elbows down. And if this still isn't giving you enough stretch, you can actually come all the way to the ground and try to just do a little bit of a squat. I think this is probably too much for you though.
That's more than I want to do at my age.
And even while you're here, you can just keep pushing your knees back.
Definitely can feel that on the insides of my thighs. And it is very important to keep your knees from turning in, not only for the stretch, but also to avoid damaging ligaments in your knee that keep things connected.
Yeah, so if you want to just stay there, while you're in this position, if you want to try to keep your heels moving in front of you, if they go behind you, you're really not going to get much of a stretch. You really want them to be turned flat to the front.
Mm-hmm. It's important to do the stretching exercises slowly and completely before fencing and afterward. Mostly to prepare yourself before you fence and to cool off afterward.
It's also important to consistently stretch every day just to increase your general flexibility and to reduce the risk of an injury during a bout.
Thanks, Coach. It's good to have someone with your expertise help us out.